Hello. Welcome to the Eddie Conversation Podcast. My name is Eddie Vigil, and I am your host. This is episode number 38, and joining me today is Nora Ann Brucklacher. You are I just went through the whole list. All right. Marriage and family therapist, owner of Sierra Sunrise Wellness.
Correct.
And you have a new segment.
Therapy Thursdays on mornings on Fox 11. So it's every other Thursday, and it's a mental health news segment talking about areas of concern or areas of helpful wellness tips. There's a lot that we have already covered and plan to cover.
Yes. I guess that was the last thing I was going to mention that I slipped on, but ambassador for mental health.
Right.
I guess just to clarify for people, I am currently in your home. Thanks for having me. Reno, Nevada, or Sparks, Nevada specifically.
And I am here with my family, and I think that's one of the greatest pieces of today is we've been friends for a very long time, former roommates, in fact. Yes. You introduced me to my husband, and now we have 3 beautiful children, so you guys might hear some of that chaos in the background from time to time during this filming. So,
yes.
But it's really wonderful to be here with you today.
It's very nice. A nice excuse to catch up and talk about, because we haven't had a chance to sit down and chat for a while, so this is very cool.
Post-COVID, post-COVID, but since COVID arrived, I would say that's been the case. You were here, I think, for my daughter's first birthday, second birthday, one of the two. But that was also really special. And it's been a while. She'll be 3 in December, so.
Yes. Yeah, I got lucky with that one. I was in town for Christmas or something. Is Christmas time?
Yeah.
Is that, yeah. So I don't know where to start with. Okay, we can dive into some of our personal history and talking about, because when I think of you, I guess in my personal creative journey as like a filmmaker and stuff, I always look back to the very beginning phases of deciding to even just push forward with producing my own stuff initially. And I was living with you at the time, and I don't remember the specific conversation, but what came out of it was Nora was pushing me to just make the leap, make the jump, and start doing the thing. So so for me, I credit you for a lot of help, being a big supportive player in getting me, pushing me out, getting me out of my comfort zone, and
I love that.
And that
Thank
kind
you.
of stuff. So it's
that means a lot.
Makes me very happy.
Yeah.
To see your face. But let's talk. Let's start with talking about the new segment and kind of what the goals are there. And you're giving me a heads up a little bit before we started rolling, and I said to save it, but I'm curious as to how new it is, what the long-term plans of it are, like the goals, and what kind of areas you are, like how to decide when to talk about each topic or what the priorities are on that, how to, like what to start with. And yes, all right, we have a hello.
And we lost the robe now. Yes. Yeah. Okay. So with the mental health segment, it came about in that I have been working with different news channels in this area for the last 2 and a bit years. So June of 2019 is when I first started all of that. Hey, love. Remember, we're doing this right now. Yeah, nope, we're not going to do the volume because Mommy's having a very special conversation. Nope. Okay, love bug. One. Okay. This isn't going to work right now. You can either go upstairs and you can have volume, or you can stay down here and you can just watch the picture. What do you think? Do you want to stay down here and just watch the picture without a volume? Because otherwise, if you want volume, that's totally fine. No picking your nose, please. Bloody nose. Okay, perfect. It was very exciting, of course, to begin that journey. But what really came about from it was some very important conversations that it was really wonderful to start hearing other people being willing to talk about these subjects, and even really, with the news, being willing to discuss them, because there are some topics that I think they probably don't really want to touch with a 10-foot pole, but they do all the time. For example, teen suicide. That is one that they do report on. Shh, 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 shh. You want me to put that in your hair? And it's a reality. It's something that, unfortunately, it does happen. There are domestic violence incidents. There's substance abuse issues. Of course, they report on DUIs, things like that. And so the truth of it is I think people will say, like, mental health, that doesn't even really exist. But the reality is that we all have mental health. Whatever condition it might be in is a whole other question. But we all have mental health. So being able to bring conversation to it, having the opportunity to help people to recognize when things are occurring. And I think as well, I am hopeful to provide hope. So I think hope is one of the most important components. But with the mental health segment recently, it's been a really exciting opportunity. Mm-hmm. We have just recently talked about, say, like the Afghanistan situation that occurred. And throughout this COVID experience, I have appeared via Skype. Recently, I've been able to go back into the studio and do the live segments with them there too. I mean, for the mental health segment, they're all live, but I see myself as a conduit of sorts. That might be a strange way to put it, but of course there is an ego boost that comes along with this. How could there not be, right? It's very exciting to be in this position. And when it really comes down to it, it's not really about me per se. It's about the larger whole. It's about the community care aspect. I think self-care just isn't enough. Community care has to be a part of the conversation. And that's what this is providing, is that larger audience, that larger potential for being able to open the doorways for perhaps, hopefully, more people getting the services that they need.
So when you say... So when you say community care... Community care. So what does that mean?
So community care is that it takes a village. We are a village, and it's everybody contributing in whatever capacity that they are able to. But we have for millennia taken care of one another, mm-hmm. right? Each person in a tribe would have their specialty. This is the woodworker. This is the person that you go to for your swords or whatever. Sure. I mean, but really, like the blacksmith, right? But then you also have those who are the healers of the group. And I would put myself into that category as I provide counsel. But when life gets hard, and it does, just inherently it does, we rely upon those resources around us. And I think in our day and age, and especially during COVID times, isolation is the name of the game. But that is almost against our nature. Some people obviously really enjoy isolation, and for them, it really hasn't been that big of a change. If anything, they're like, "Oh, that's very validating to my existence now." But majority of people, they rely on that community. So community care is being there for and with one another.
So it's more about, in terms of the mental health and keeping yourself healthy, having places to go and support in the community is the goal. And I guess I was thinking about it as expanding awareness is also like, that's kind of what maybe the segment is about, is like, this is a topic we can discuss, this is a topic that's out there.
Yeah.
So feel free to reach out and all sorts of things there. So
hopefully, yeah.
What was the first topic that you covered in the segment? Do you recall?
Yeah, I do. So the first official one that I covered when it was Therapy Thursdays was talking about Access to Healthcare Network. It's an incredible community organization. The CEO is Sherry Rice, and I do a podcast with her pretty regularly. But she is just an incredible powerhouse, and so I wanted to give a shout out to her. Access to Healthcare Network provides access to healthcare for those who are underinsured or uninsured. So during times of health crises, what do you do? Because it can absolutely cost an arm and a leg to receive services. And that can be a huge barrier for people to do preventative care or when they really need the services to go in at all. So that was my first segment that I covered. My first one with Mornings on Fox 11 was February of 2020, and it was Kobe Bryant's death.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was your first.
My first with that particular news team.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm trying to. All right. Okay. Yeah. What? I guess like big world dreams of how you would like to see people interacting, and like to see like to see people operating in the world. What kind of dream? Because you're doing this for a reason.
Sure.
So you're trying to create the world that you wish to see around you, as I'm assuming, right?
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. I love that.
So what does that world look like to you?
Well, there's the cliche answer, which is, I just want us all to get along. But the truth is that conflict is a part of existence. Conflicts are probably the reason why I have such job security, is because communication can be particularly difficult. Emotions, I can't tell you the number of people who are like, I don't want to cry today. And I'm like, okay. And I try very hard, in fact, to ensure that people don't go beyond what they're really ready to do. That can bring with it what's called the vulnerability hangover, which means that we perhaps opened up too much too fast. And that can leave you with the feeling that again, that sense of vulnerability. So the truth of it is that I don't necessarily see that we're ever going to not have conflict. Conflict, I think, as well, is how we grow. I think that being able to discuss differing perspectives and ideas can be really incredible towards innovation. With that said, what's the world that I want to create? I want to create a world that's conscientious and hospitable, and we look out for our neighbor. And we also are willing to do that deep dive internally so that we can work on our own ish rather than projecting it outward. anger, for example, is very externalized. So rather than necessarily attending to some of the things that are happening internally, a lot of people will push that outwards. Now, that's not to say that anger doesn't also have very much a place at the table. There are things to be angry about, and that there are also people who are very scared to get angry because for them it represents something else that perhaps they themselves were exposed to that they don't want to replicate. I get that too. I think that it's allowing for these voices to be heard. And I think that it's learning how to have that dialogue so that we as a collective whole can do better. Yeah.
That's great. You mentioned, how did you describe it? The hangover?
The vulnerability hangover.
Is that, so like you said, sharing too much too quick, like maybe, is that like a form of potential regret, or like
it can be if you don't have the foundation for it.
Yeah, where like I shared everything and now I just feel bad that I did that and I don't want to do it again. Is that so there's like this middle ground of how to properly share, how much to share.
Yeah. I will say it to
Sure.
all of my clients in a first session, is that if I start to notice that we're hitting kind of their threshold, right? That's as far as they can go. So a threshold is about the point where we might go just ever so slightly past it, but then that's it. We don't want to go any farther than that. And that doesn't seem much, right? But if we do that little by little over time, see how much we've already done. That it wouldn't feel like it though, and that's the importance. Is that's how that growth in progress can occur. But we want to be really conscientious to our own boundaries, and I think that actually is one of the areas where some people aren't aware what their boundaries are, and some of us aren't until perhaps it has been stepped on, and then we don't know how to talk about it. Some people might internalize that and then explode, keeping all those little tiny things added up, and then rather than speaking to those smaller things and letting each one of those things get addressed, it might begin to fester and become almost like an infected wound. So I love this analogy of the infected wound. I just think I'm a visual person. Sure. So if you have an infection, what do you need to do?
Clean it.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
And let it heal.
Well, and that's just it. It won't heal while it still has the infection, right? So if you don't do that process, then what?
Then it just gets worse and it hurts.
To what end? If you just let it keep on, to what end?
That's a good question.
So you very well might have, like, if you think of an actual wound, an amputation.
If you want to, I was going to say it can get, depending on where it is or how that works.
Yeah. Right. So you might lose a part of yourself.
You could die.
Or you could die. And so one of my biggest areas is suicide prevention, but it's not just at your hand directly, it's also the indirect things that we are doing. That's where some of those reckless behaviors come in, where we just don't care as much anymore about taking care of ourselves. It could be in the ballpark of like food. It's a comfort, right? And as we're doing it, we're like, this is probably not good for me, but you know what? I'm having a hard day or what have you. I've had those days. I still have those days. Sure. And I'm not saying don't have a lovely, luxurious meal, but what I will say is it's being in integrity with our actions. It's really looking at how we're treating ourselves, especially over time. This is also how substance abuse issues come filtering in, and then substances become their own beast. But back to the wound analogy here, we're perhaps trying to do things to self-medicate the infection that's there. But really all of it is technically a Band-Aid over an infection, and that's not necessarily going to help anything until we really attend to the infection itself.
Yeah, and I wanted to go back a little bit because you talk about this, the thresholds, and kind of like when you said in the first session, you can when you're interacting with the person, you can tell, all right, we're reaching the threshold. We shouldn't go past this point because they could just be not good for the long run to go there. And then you mentioned that a lot of people aren't aware of their own threshold, the self-awareness of knowing when you're going too far or that you're not sharing enough. Like, how does, I guess from like your perspective when handling a client or interacting with a client, what kind of, how do you gauge that threshold as an observer? Like how can your observation help someone understand themselves?
As a trained professional, there are certain things that I watch out for, right? So somebody begins to start some nervous habits, they start to tap their foot, they start picking at their nails, they might start farting their nails. You can see their elevation increasing, right? I think that there are certain visible signs, but I also try to watch the cadence of their breath, because when they start to have more shallow breathing, it's an indication that they're going into fight or flight. And perhaps they also start to get a bit defensive, so more on the fight side. And if we're tapping into that area, it means that defense mechanisms are raising up, and that means that we're heading into a really tender area.
Yes. I was talking to somebody recently about... this feels like a little bit of a tangent, but I think it's on the same vein, where the word adulting came up. And I don't like that word because I don't feel like there's no such thing as being an adult. We're all kids just trying to do our best and make sense of the world and blah, blah, blah. Like, none of us know what we're doing. We're just, sure, we're paying bills, whatever. That's not an adult thing. It's just a thing. So, and then she was talking about how I think she does works in the therapy world a little bit too, where she was talking about tantrum versus like the fight or flight adult version of what that is. Yeah. Whether you can't get through to somebody you can't get through to a child if they're tantruming. You gotta first address and cool it off, and then you have the learning moment after that.
Right.
But as an adult, you don't call it a tantrum anymore because tantrums are for children. But it's essentially the same thing that you just described, where once the fight or flight is triggered and people are elevated to a certain sense, aka some tantruming. Yeah. Yeah. Either I don't know where I was going with that, but
meltdown mode. Yeah. I definitely think that adults still have that experience, and to the point of we're all kids, and we are supposed to just know how to do some of these things. Some people haven't necessarily had that guidance. Some people might have parents that literally hold their hand and show them how to do these things, how to write a check, if that was what I grew up with, so that might be a little bit archaic now. Or, setting up a bank account. What is a credit score? Things like that. I think that there's a lot of quote unquote on the job training of life, and the truth of it is, like with COVID, for example, we haven't been through this before. So why would we know how to do it per se, and how to do it really, really well? A lot of things take practice, and we have to learn from those mistakes.
Yes. I don't know. Where do you want to? Is there? Because we could talk about. I'm trying to figure out where we want to go. Because I know COVID is a big topic of discussion. I know you started doing a lot more community outreach. I don't know if you were doing that before. For whatever reason, my mental memory recalls you doing a lot of speaking out during COVID, because a lot of just the circumstances of, like you just described, of what is this? We're all stuck together dealing with
right.
Our closest relationships are being tested because we're stuck with each other indefinitely at that point. How has COVID Is that yeah? How is that progressing? I don't know. You're
That's a
on top
great
of that one.
question.
Yeah.
It's a really great question. And to first share that this last year, 2020, was by far my heaviest caseload. It was certainly the most people I was seeing in a day, all virtual for me at that point in time. And that would include about like 9 hours a day, 8 hours a day of each client being in severe crisis. Not everyone, but majority were panicking. A lot of them were dealing with some major issues occurring. I remember feeling my heart drop a little bit as we went into quarantine, because really it was kind of the perfect storm for a lot of other major issues to begin to present. Again, substance abuse issues, domestic violence, a big one, and suicide, definitely. I was especially worried about child abuse issues. There was just a number of different things that I knew were about to get severely exacerbated. And we didn't know the length of time that this would go on for. So that uncertainty, big emotions just flared.
Yeah, the financial thing on top of that too.
Right.
People losing their jobs left and right.
Yep.
Yeah.
So let's see here. For every point that the unemployment rate increases, there is a correlating 1.5% increase in the suicide rate. And that can really translate to some huge, huge numbers. So I felt like I, at many times, was trying to plug the holes of a boat, trying to keep this ship afloat. And it's very typical for me at any point in time to have maybe one or two people that I'm really, really concerned about as far as suicidal ideation. It might have been closer to about 10 at any given point this last year. And I mean severe ideation. So that was really hard. That was really heavy. And there are many times I felt at a loss on my own side, uncertain of where it was going to go from here, how we would get through all of this together. So where I'm at now, as we're in August of 2021, is that it has set the stage for me to be able to expand services at my business. And that's that's really exciting. It's really something that I feel so much gratitude to be able to do. Currently build out is occurring, and we will be putting in an additional 5 therapy offices. Hopefully there will be multiple people in each office, or at least a couple of them. So we potentially will be able to bring on more than 5 therapists. But I also am very excited to have different wellness modalities. I think different types speak to different people. In addition to that, we will have yoga, meditation, wellness workshops, and support groups. Because I think that going forward, it's that community piece. And I think that when tough times hit, the way that we get through it is being able to have our village to lean on. So as hard as this last year was, I really believe it has set the stage for this expansion to really be possible.
Mm-hmm. Well, congratulations on the expansion.
It's
very cool. No, it's great. It sounds like all those. I'm trying to imagine it. It's nice because you definitely seem like a person that, like, all these avenues that you can help, and you're only one person. Yes. So being able to yeah, you said the expansion's a great word too, and be able to get your additional help to um, offer even more help, which is beautiful.
Yeah.
How one thing that I'm curious about, and this is, I guess, more of a personal Nora side of the having that sort of caseload during this uncertain time of the indefinite nature of it all, and the heightened emotions of everybody that you're interacting with. How what do you do for yourself to keep yourself grounded and be able to take on other people's emotions and all that? How does that work?
Yeah. I have people tell me all the time, I could not do what you do.
I mean, I'm sure it's similar to like a muscle where you built up a tolerance of
Yeah.
some sort, but
Sure.
I'm sure there's.
Yeah, I think that sometimes there are moments where we just have to do whatever it is. We have to put one foot in front of the other, and we potentially will be able to further process it later, like we are now, right? I was pregnant during that whole time, so that was that was actually for me my own little lighthouse. That was my little beacon of hope of remembering what's still yet to come. And keeping that in mind is that this is a moment, this is a puzzle piece in the much greater expanse of our life's time. And I think in terms of what I would do for myself is going out in the garden, pulling the weeds. Oh, when I was really working through something, pulling weeds is really cathartic. But I also tend to be really protective of my home time. And I think that having that time with my kids and hearing their giggles and being able to have a really nice hug with my husband, those are things that really keep me going and remembering my own why. Viktor Frankl described that we have to have a why in order for us to work through the suffering of whatever it is. So Viktor Frankl survived Auschwitz, and he kept himself going because he hoped to be able to, of course, see his loved ones when he was on the other side of it. But in addition to that, he would hide little napkin notes, and he would plan to write a book, which he did. It's called Man's Search for Meaning, and definitely one that has been very, very helpful for me, life-changing, in fact. But that was also something I kept in mind was we have to know our why. We have to know the meaning behind our suffering, because when we can do that, we can endure so much. Doesn't make it okay, doesn't make it right, but sometimes that is the choice that's given to us.
Yeah. No, I know you've mentioned that book to me definitely plenty of times. I should probably read it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What are you feeling right now? How are you feeling?
Well, I'm just trying to. I mean, that's kind of why I asked the last question. I was like, how do you handle all of it? It sounds very. Because I know even in my own life, like I kind of mentioned my move to Los Angeles and the pressures that come with even just surviving down there and getting recognized and noticed and gaining experience, and everybody around me is doing the same thing, so everybody is going through this crazy anxiety dream push of, and again, deny it left and right, and everybody's got to put their, like I talk to plenty of people that are still trying to find themselves and trying to figure out their next paths, whether it be family or friends or otherwise. And I know that after these extended conversations, I kind of feel weighted down with like, I feel like that was helpful for them. I took some burden off of them, but then I get, weighted, and I'm like, oh, like luckily I'm in a position I feel confident enough and stable where I can take it on. But as a profession, I'm just thinking about putting myself in your shoes, where I'm like, that's very noble work, and it's very necessary and needed for people. But I'm kind of feeling a little bit of the weight right now. It's like, all right, I'm taking on some of Nora's weight right now, I feel like.
Oh, wow. That's really interesting.
But,
well, here's the thing
that, I mean,
we can help shoulder that burden with one another. And perhaps when we hear other people's stories, we feel that impact. I think that one of the other devices I would use is that's theirs. And I'm not in a position that I'm there to quote unquote fix it for them, right? That's part of their journey. And one of the best parts of my job is that, again, I get to be counsel, but what I give is more listening. Suggestions, maybe recommendations on occasion, depending on what's upcoming. It might be a book suggestion, but at the same time, it is that person's life, and for them to be able to carry and decide also what stones that they want to take out of their backpack. So let me come back a little bit of what I mean by that. I like to, again, use visuals and analogies, metaphors. Oh, yes. But one that I really like to use is the idea that we have this backpack that we carry throughout life, right? And early on, we might put some pebbles in, right? And it's not so bad. That's fine. We got this. Some people might have some trauma, so that's more like some really heavy rocks that we're putting into it, right? But typically, throughout life, we're going to add to that backpack and that load. And there's really only so much that we're going to be able to carry. You know, once it gets halfway full, you're like, oh man, this is noticeable. This is, I'm sore. But we keep on keeping on. And then it gets to a point perhaps where it is too much. And at that point in time, we now come to a crossroads of what we're going to do about it. Ideally, we'll be able to take some of those stones out. And how do we do that? Well, it might be that, again, we notice the infection, we begin to make efforts towards trying to heal ourselves, but it might also be reconciling certain things within ourselves that we don't necessarily need to carry any longer. That would include, not that you don't care tremendously about the burdens of others, but they're not necessarily yours to carry. So perhaps if you're carrying other people's stuff, then those are some of those stones where those aren't for you. You can love that person, you can assist that person, but that does not necessarily mean that their stones, their trauma is trauma that you're also in need of carrying. We as a collective, when we see one another's trauma, it's empathy. It's compassion when we feel the desire to do something about that and to be able to take it on. But compartmentalization is really key to the work that I do. For each person that sits in front of me, I like to open that box, be fully 100% present. But at the same time, I have to be able to close it, put it away, in order for me to then put my intention and focus where it's needed. That doesn't mean that things don't filter through, because I think about my people all the time. All the time. My people know that they're dearly loved. That's something that I try very much to convey in my actions. But at the same time, if I'm not okay, then I'm not going to be as great of service to them.
Yeah, I guess in the analogy space, I imagine it being like you have your backpack, and then I'm listening. Let's just I'm listening to somebody, and that listening is me taking some weight out of their backpack. Let's say, so it's me taking. I imagine it because in the moment, ideally, if one cares, the weight is actually. I imagine the weight is being felt. So it's like, all right, I'm actually taking your stone and putting it in my backpack for right now to make you feel, to help
you
lessen your load. And then once we separate and I've helped in that sense, or however you want to see that. I go through my own process of recognizing that stone's not mine, and then I take that stone out of my backpack and then put it on the ground back in the river or whatever. So that's kind of how I envision that weight being handled. Is there's that post process of understanding it's not your weight to carry, but still. I don't know.
I think there's a collective burden. And there are some really, really difficult things that happen in this world. That's one of the things that's happening with Afghanistan right now. Okay. There's just this massive collective mourning and grief that's taking place. And I think that so many of us are feeling it. I think that that's one of the helpless feelings of watching what's occurring in Afghanistan at this point in time, for women especially. It's heartbreaking. And when we feel that sense of helplessness or powerlessness, that in particular, I think, is when we get that very heavy feeling of, I can't do anything necessarily to fix this or make it better. And that, I think, is one of those times where we really kind of crumble a little bit internally. Yeah.
Afghanistan is a whole...
It's a whole other ball of wax.
Oh, man.
Yep.
All right. So...
Yep. There's a lot happening in this world at this time.
Okay. Yeah, one other thing, I guess one thing that Afghanistan... I guess just to stay on that for one beat, because I haven't quite had a chance to express this to many people, but I recently listened to the Joe Rogan podcast.
Sure.
He had a woman on recently that's kind of stuck with me since I listened to it. It was very heavy. She escaped from North Korea and was talking for 2 hours and 45 minutes about existence there, the Holocaust that are happening there currently that have been going on for 80 years, and who knows how long they'll continue, the concentration camps, punishments of your grandfathers, and all that kind of stuff. So then I have no idea how to process that, really. Like, that's been like a weird thing to have in the back of my mind since that has kind of come forward. So then hearing the Afghanistan scenario on top of that, I'm just trying to... It's all very weird to me that both are happening simultaneously, and for the most part, we're only hearing about one of the situations and not the other. So it's I'm trying to figure out. It's the same kind of thing of like, what can I do? What is there to be done? And awareness is kind of the biggest thing we can do to just, this exists and this is what's happening, and we don't want it to be happening, and please know that it's happening. Right. But I know that it's all very tricky and scary and very crazy.
Yeah, very. So, these things have been happening the world over for, again, as long as the Earth, well, not as long as the Earth, because we're not as old as that. That's very, whoa.
As long as...
So as long as people have been around, I think that these things have been occurring, at least to some extent or another. And we live in the day and age of information. It is at our fingertips. All you have to do is open your phone and look at the news. And then all of a sudden you're flooded with all of this information about things that are happening everywhere. Maybe they're natural disasters here or natural disasters there. Maybe you're quite literally in the thick of it. We have this massive blanket of smoke over us here in the Reno area, but that's due to these massive wildfires that are occurring. There are times where we cannot ignore these things that are happening. They just are. I think that part of it is this awakening experience that comes along with it. I think that there are things that are in our control, and then there are the things that are outside of that control. And I think that's one of the parts that can be particularly difficult, is that some of the things that we want to affect and make difference toward are outside of our control. So then we're left to look at the things that are within that sphere of our control. And it's not as many as we'd like it to be, as many things as we'd like for it to be. So, for example, I think that it is within our control in terms of how we treat one another. To the point earlier that, a lot of families and friends have really taken quite a hard hit this last year, whether it be because they were in such close quarters or maybe because of distance, possibly political feelings and differences of opinion, whether it was the actual election or maybe it's the handling of COVID, and to get a vaccine, to not get a vaccine, to wear a mask, to not wear a mask. I think that these are things that we're coming to find that people are really digging their heels into, and part of that is because of safety. And politically, life is political inherently. I think that there are certain things that we can attempt to address, but with these things that are happening the world over, part of our job, I think, is to be affected, but also to allow ourselves to see what it is that we personally want to focus on to try to do better. I think to Afghanistan, there's a lot of people that have felt like, what was the point? What was the purpose of $2 trillion having been spent
20 years,
over 20 years of time, the lives lost? So certainly there were the civilians there were the militants, but then there were our own soldiers. And if we look at the numbers for our own soldiers of those who died in combat or what have you, things that occurred there, it pales in comparison to the number of suicide deaths that have happened. So since 2001, there has been 114,000 veterans who have completed suicide. It accounts for 22% of all deaths. That's where that number, the 22%, comes from. There was the I don't know if it was TikTok or whatever, that people were doing the push-ups, the 22 push-ups a day. Anyway, so
I'm not on TikTok, but
yeah, I'm not really either. So I'm not really with the times, I guess. I'm a little bit, as we have already seen, archaic.
So you're saying 22% of all deaths in the last 20 years?
Yes. So I would say, let's see here, for post 9/11 vets, it accounts for 22% of all deaths. It is the second highest cause of death for veterans. But with that said, who knows what 2020 was? These are pre-COVID numbers as well. So what it has been this last year, and honestly in this last week even, I don't know. But it's something that that is an area where I know I can try to affect change. That is where I'm focusing, is suicide prevention, because that is something that I can do something about, and it's meaningful and it's important. That's not to say that I won't, of course, hopefully at some point in my life, be able to advocate for women's rights. I believe in equity. And the things that we're hearing about Afghanistan, or these North Korean women, or North Korean people in general, it's so disheartening. It's so hard to hear. And I think that all of it is where we as a collective whole are becoming attuned to one another in this globalization process. I think that as a collective whole, humanity is moving from such horrible forms of relating to one another We probably have fewer deaths when it comes to like homicides and things like that than we would have had 1,000 years ago. That's just my guess. I don't know that there's any statistics for that, but I'm guessing.
Sure.
With high probability, I would say that it's hopefully a whole lot less than what it was way back when. But we don't necessarily see that. We see what's happening now. We see what's being reported on the news, and it feels like it's happening all the time. In truth of it, I think we have progressed immensely. There's a lot of work to do still.
Definitely.
That's
I mean,
life.
there was a lot there.
There's a lot to unpack.
I will say, in terms of the veterans, the military veterans, and suicide prevention, and what one could do there, I don't know. I didn't quite know this going in. Like, I've been working with this production company that produces content for military veterans specifically. It's like veteran television, and they do like comedic content, kind of joking about like the boots on the ground actual experience of being in the military versus like the glorified stuff like they put in the campaigns, like be a hero, like whatever, all that kind of action movie looking stuff. Like they actually joke about the recruiting process and how disorganized stuff is, like all that. So I know that it's called veteran television, and I know like their overall goal is to give that outlet for these military veterans, that there's at least this content they can watch with their buddies and talk about, and it keeps kind of them going, and they can all bond and laugh at these tragedies that they experience versus like, so then that kind of comes to mind. I'm like, oh, there's however we can do our parts, everybody's, I'm a big fan of the putting positivity out there and whatnot. But let's jump to a little bit of a lighter topic.
Sure, absolutely.
With our last half an hour or so.
Okay.
Because prefaced a little bit that we did live with each other for a little while, and there's still a part of Nora that maybe I'm a little bit unfamiliar with, like pre moving in with you. I want to talk about the Nora story as a whole too. Like it's very, I remember moving in with you initially, and like just knowing how awesome you were from the get go. With, oh my gosh, this woman has like her own house in Midtown. She's got like multiple businesses at the time, and it's like she's got, you got your cat, you had your cats and your dog, and I don't know, the college, the multiple degrees, yeah. So I'm just like, wow, who is this person? And since then you've only followed through with everything that you kind of had envisioned, like the whole time that I've known you too, with you had dreams of the family life and these expansions, and it's been a joy to be a part of and to be on the outside watching and all that. But where does for when you look back on yourself, where does this version of you kind of has this version of you always existed, or did 17-year-old you start growing, like, there's different branches of ourselves that I look at myself as, but is there, where does the Nora story start for you? Just 5, birth?
Well, for any of us, it's probably birth.
Sure.
But yeah, I would say if I could pinpoint, the real beginning for me personally, it was when my father passed away when I was 14 years old. That turned my whole life upside down, as death often will do, especially when it's a very close person. And yeah, that was a huge game changer. We moved about 4 months after he passed away to Reno. And that was in the middle of my 8th grade year. And I think that Reno did provide me opportunities that I might not have had otherwise. Speech and debate was a really big one. I, in high school, was able to get 2 state championships. Was also Miss Nevada Junior National Teenager. A lot happened. But the reason why I think I've been so propelled towards achievement and doing well is that it was probably about a year and a half after my dad passed away that our home burned down. So it was another really big, significant loss. We moved to Reno to be closer to my grandparents, who then died in succession of one another. My grandpa right before the fire, and my grandma about 10 months following that. My mom was going through some treatments that were difficult to watch her have to endure, and she started to lose her hair and became very gaunt. There was a point in my life that I thought I would be an orphan, and I felt like I have to be okay. And I didn't know who else to really rely on except for that I had to have my own back. And I think that was a huge component to my desiring to do well academically, but also it set the stage for being able to empathize with people when it comes to grief, when it comes to trauma. I have my own background of some very difficult experiences and circumstances, and because of that background, I can relate to people on a very different level. And I'm so grateful for that. Not grateful for all the things that happened, but I am grateful for the me that I am now, having endured it. And another big one that I think is important is that a friend of mine, my senior year of college, completed suicide. And it really blindsided me. At that point in time, I was close to 200 pounds, which I'm only about 5'3". So really what it conveyed is I think I was really heavily depressed. And I didn't realize it entirely, but I myself might have had a bit of a foot out the door, so to speak. His choice, which I know had to have come from immense pain, felt like something I did not want to do. I didn't want for my family, my friends, to experience what I myself was feeling in the wake of his loss. And that was, for me, an awakening moment of realizing if I take this off the table, if this is no longer an option, not that I, again, was really considering it, but it's kind of one of those escape hatch plans, plan B. But that was no longer something I wanted to have on the table. And so what did that mean? Well, it meant I had to truly live. I had to truly make it a life that I wanted to live. So I graduated college, moved back to Reno. I went to UC Santa Barbara for college, moved back to Reno to get my master's, and that was about the point that you met me, just following completing my master's and on my journey towards full licensure.
And what were you going to school for during that time?
So I got my bachelor's degree in psychology, and my master's was in counseling and educational psychology with an emphasis in marriage and family therapy.
So the professional plan was always this route, kinda, or was there deviations on the direction you wanted to go with that at any point, or?
For me, I was very focused. Because of my background, I felt like this was really the path I wanted to go. I had had a couple of therapists myself. One when I was really young, and my parents were going through a divorce, and my mom just wanted to make sure that I was doing okay. And I loved her. I thought she was an amazing therapist. She had this sand tray room, and there's figurines on these shelves, and I was like, oh, this is amazing. But she took pictures. She told me, tell me a story. And so I did. And she took pictures of it, and she put it into a little book, and she sent it to me. It was so meaningful. And she also apparently got into some sort of small fender bender with a rental car and got some nail polish, do a little fix. But she gave me the nail polish. It was like the seafoam green. I was like, oh, this is so cool. It was relating to me and as a person, and I really loved her. And she was also the one who really emphasized to my mom to get me a journal. And that's one of the things that I often do is journal. That I would say is where I recalibrate and I own my own story. But I also had another therapist during my teen years that I felt less enthused with, and thought, you know what, I can do this better. Maybe that was just my teen self.
Sure. Sounds like.
But that, I think, was definitely something that propelled me into this portion of my career.
Yeah. Can you tell me a bit? Okay, this is more of like a personal aside, but journaling. You still journal?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Can you? Yeah. How? I tried the daily journaling this year.
Sure.
I feel like I'm very good at like when I make a decision to do something, I can follow through and do it day in, day out. Journaling, however, I fell off the wagon on. I think I did it for a few months, and I wasn't quite sure what I was like. I didn't know. I feel like my issue was I didn't know why I was doing it or what I wasn't really feeling anything doing it. So what? It might help me with jumping back on the wagon, but like what is your approach on like in the moment, or is it in the moment thing that you're getting in the experience of like unloading on the page, or is it like a future thing to look back on? How do
all of the above?
Okay.
Yep. I mean, truly, I look back at some of my oldest journals and I cringe for sure. Oh boy. So I probably don't do that particularly often.
On the air, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, so I've got an entire bookshelf that's full
dangerous, isn't it?
Yeah, certainly. And if so, one of the other pieces I'll say to our audience is if you don't feel safe, if you feel like you have confidential information that won't be safe in there, then that's probably going to be one of the reasons, impetus wise, that they wouldn't to utilize a journal.
Sure.
But with that said, for those that are just trying to get into the groove of it, I don't do it daily, actually.
Okay.
I do it as needed, and it might be a week that goes by, it might be daily for a period of time, things are happening, or I have the time, the desire. I think that it's really a neat thing to go back and to read some of the things that I was experiencing, and oftentimes too I'll write down the things that I don't want to forget. For example, really meaningful moments where maybe it was my kiddo taking his first steps, and explaining and describing the experience of what it was for me. Or maybe, it was the birth of my children. Maybe it was that it was just a perfect day. I had today a perfect day. I woke up with the sunrise, and I got to have my cup of coffee on the porch, and I got to just take some really good deep breaths, and that was in and of itself so peaceful. That is one of those moments where it's like, oh, nice. I'm glad for me that I had that, and I think that there are, of course, really hard things that I need to write about as well. There are things that I don't want to share with others. or that I don't yet have the words for. And so maybe at first it's complaining, or just being mad or whatever it is. And then I think I work through it to find more so the nugget that I really need to focus on. Anger is what's called a secondary emotion. Here's my little one. See, she's angry right now.
I want my chocolate. No, I don't know what she said.
I want it now, right? I hear you, girl. That's so true. I get that. I feel you. But anger is a secondary emotion. So there's always something behind it. Maybe it's hurt. Maybe it's pain. Maybe it's frustration. Maybe it's impatience. Whatever it is, that is part of what's fueling the anger, right? And so that's usually where I'll go in my journal entries, is what's behind it? What's going on? What do I need to tune into and do that internal check-in around in order for me to not lash out or put this on somebody else?
Yeah, it was nice to hear that you journal for the positive stuff. I mean,
Yeah.
I know I talk to people about meditation on occasion, and I often hear that, like, oh, I don't really I meditate on it as needed, and normally I only meditate when this is them speaking. Normally I only meditate when I'm feeling like stressed or anxiety, and then they go into the meditative thing to try to chill out. But it's not like they wait for that to do it. So I was kind of expecting to hear that, like, oh, I'm a little bit overwhelmed, I'm gonna journal. But I'm sure that happens too.
Definitely.
I journaled. It was pre-journal times for me, where I journaled a couple times during lockdown, because it was just like, woo. But no, the positive stuff, that's great. Yeah, locking in those memories.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know I have a dream journal where because dreams disappear like an instant. So
Definitely.
So that happens on occasion.
That's awesome.
That's whatever. Yes. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so you had those two larger life events that really directed you to kind of the foundational pillars, I'll call them, on who you are today. Can we talk about yoga?
Oh, yeah.
Yes, you mentioned in passing on the expansion that yoga is likely to be included as one of the things you provide.
Services that we offer.
Services, yes, that's the word. How is that in line with the thing you told me off camera, with your looking to you're buying back the company that you used to have?
No.
Or okay,
no. So there are times in life where we might feel as if we have failed because it didn't go according to the plan that we originally had set out to do.
Okay.
I have always dreamed of creating a wellness center. And this was 2014. I was co-owner of this yoga studio, and at that point in time, I did the build out for my private practice, which is just nestled downstairs, and the yoga studio was just upstairs. And oh man, I feel like it was really, really tremendously difficult at that point in time for a multitude of reasons. But with that said, I learned so much. That set the foundation for me to have a run at it again at this point in time, knowing what has transpired previously. And in truth, I didn't really feel as if I had failed per se. But I think that for me personally, I didn't have the foundation that I do now. So I would say with what's going on at this point in time is there were other tenants that occupied that space upstairs. And I don't know what their circumstances were, but they no longer are there. And the building owner said, hey, you described that you might be interested in taking over a space again. Do you want these 2 spaces upstairs? And it was much bigger than I had even anticipated. But in my soul, it was a huge yes. Like, let's do this.
Sure.
So the yoga piece of it will still be a part of it, but it's going to look a little different than what it was previously. I'll only be able to have 10 students for yoga in specific. We'll be able to have a much larger attendance for meditation, because we'll just be able to have people on cushions or chairs depending on their physical needs. But we're also going to do those support groups and the wellness workshops in this group space. And what feels really great about this is there are all sorts of different ways for finding healing and well-being. Yoga in particular, I really love because it combines mind, body, and soul. We're not inherently disconnected, and yet in our society, in our day and age, it's almost as if the mind overrules the body. It tells us what it is going to do. Even when we receive those messages of pain, we're trying to overrule them all the time. But in yoga,
mind over matter.
That's right. And at what cost? I think that the body doesn't have recourse verbally. So it gives you these messages and says like, please stop. Please don't do that. But it can't tell you that. You have to find that understanding, I suppose. In yoga, you're going to get into a position, and if you feel that message of pain, that's a signal to back out. That you don't need to have pain. What you should have is a really good deep stretch. But when we're feeling that, then it's an indication that something's not quite right and we need to listen. So a little bit of science here. Hey, the seat of emotion in your brain is what's called the amygdala. And the amygdala is in the midbrain. There's the longest nerve in your body called the vagus nerve, and it is very close to the amygdala, and it goes down into the heart as well as into the gut. So when somebody says, I got a gut feeling about this, they really do. But because it's the midbrain, it doesn't have the words to really help you understand what it is. So you might have a tummy ache. You might just have this feeling, just this like, oh, I don't feel good. I feel nauseous. I don't know. I feel like I'm in knots. Something is coming up for you. You just haven't yet pinpointed it and put words to it. And that's one of the things I think we can do as we're integrating in the physical aspects of well-being and wellness.
And that's what yoga provides.
It does, because you're breathing. So that in and of itself is one of the best ways to detox the body. Oh, I like that breath. Good one. That's a really nice breath you just took there. Mm. But that in and of itself is a release. And when we can do several of those breaths, and we do the same in meditation, it's a release in order to be able to become more at home in one's body. That's one of the best grounding techniques, quite frankly. I think when we're way up here, we're overwhelmed, that is a signal that we need to come back down into our grounding of self. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, I'm trying to think about so then we lived together.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like you said, it's about when I came in. You were tackling growing both businesses at the same time. That was.
Yeah, I was also a speech and debate coach for Hug High School.
Okay.
I was also a court-appointed special advocate for children. So I essentially had 4 jobs at that point in time, and it was
and you were killing
too
it.
much.
No, I mean, it's
yeah.
a lot to tackle.
Yeah.
Yeah, like you said, it's not a failure. It's just a.
It was intense. Yeah.
Plus, I mean, failing isn't necessarily a bad thing anyway. It's not,
right?
It shouldn't be looked at negatively.
Yeah.
Whatever. But okay, so I don't know. I was going to talk about the game nights very briefly.
I love the game nights.
I miss them a lot.
Me too.
I guess it's not really something I talk about too much in LA.
Yeah.
Everybody freaks out about the Twister element still.
Oh, that's so funny.
because what I guess just for people that don't know, I forget which year it was. It was before I moved in with you. Okay. I had this weirdly ambitious monthly game night goal that I had of like, all right, my New Year's resolution this year is each month I'm hosting a game night. It's gonna be the Eddie games that like get people to interact and force interactions with people that you normally wouldn't like. It was
really wholesome too.
It's beautiful.
It was really beautiful.
It was beautiful. I loved it.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, I'm sure I talked to you about it before, but the inspiration was like going to college. I hate the college parties. I hate the beer pong and drinking games and everybody sticking with their clique, and there's no interaction outside of your little group. So meeting people was like nearly impossible, and everybody had their walls up. So I'm like, what could I host to break these walls down? And Twister was the main event, and that's a great icebreaker, wall breaker.
You get to know people real fast.
Get comfortable really quick.
Yes.
And as long as everybody shows up knowing it's gonna happen, so you dress for the occasion.
Sure.
I know I had high expectations for you because you had the yoga background.
Yep.
A little bit of pressure for you to show up and perform.
Yeah.
But I look back on those very fondly.
Yeah.
And I guess, I don't know, because you mentioned it before. You mentioned it, we talked, that you met Brian on, essentially, on the Twister mat, is what I'll call it.
Well, I met him at the front door, and whoo, man, okay. I opened the door, and those blue eyes, whoo.
Brian's a hunk.
Oh man, So
sure. What's your recollection of the night?
Well,
the front door. Okay.
So I do recall you saying, "Hey, we should do a Twister night." I was like, "Oh."
You were nervous about it for a long time.
I was very nervous. I hadn't really done Twister since I was like maybe 10, and I am a yoga instructor, so I thought, okay, I'll try my hand at this. I loved it. Those nights are really fond memories for me, and it was really fun to have fun. It was very playful, and that particular night, Brian and I definitely, we were very competitive with each other, and I just, thought he was hunky. I thought he was super hot. But I also really enjoyed my conversation with him too. We exchanged our bucket list that night.
Oh, really?
That first night.
Was it pre or post Twister match?
Oh, that was definitely post. Okay. Yeah. We had also played poker, and oh my gosh, it was a lot of fun. But
because I guess the fun/funny thing was you two were the final two remaining in the tournament. Yeah. So it was a tournament event, and it was fun. I don't even remember who won that night.
Brian definitely won that night. So actually Donald Abbott took our very first picture together, which is me in a position that I'd never been able to get into before. Didn't get out of it, so fell. And in our first picture, all you see is like Brian's butt. But so Brian won that night. But he had said how he had noticed me previously. I guess he had gone over to play some video games or something. And anyway, he, I think, found the excuse of like picking my phone off of the steps outside and handing it to me, saying, "Oh, I don't want you to get this stolen." I was like, okay, thanks. And I remember thinking like, oh, Eddie's got some really cute friends. But I was like so in everything that I was doing. I was outside pulling weeds, in fact. It's a oldie but a goodie in terms of that cathartic process. But and he went that night in hopes that I would be there. So that was super sweet.
That
But
was being used. I'm just
yeah.
kidding. I'm just
Well,
kidding.
when we exchanged our bucket lists, I asked him, what's at the top of your list? And he said, to be a husband and a father. Oh,
Sure,
for
that's a good
me,
start.
it was also to be a wife and a mother. And I had written out my bucket list back in graduate school. And so I thought, oh, I like that.
Okay, good
I asked him, how
answer.
many do you want? And he said 5, no hesitation. And at the time, that was my number. Now we have 3, and I don't know.
Yeah, I was
We'll
going to ask
see.
you about that.
We'll
Yeah,
see.
yeah.
We're very game for a 4th, and that might be it. We'll see. I don't know. But all I
That's
can say is I owe you a debt of
thank you.
gratitude. I'm very grateful that that occurred. But those nights, Brian and I definitely got to grow in our relationship, and with our community, our friend group that we got to meet. There are definitely still people that we get to enjoy the company of even to this day.
Mm-hmm.
I think that it was really a cool thing that you brought that about, and I would say prepare yourself. You are just an incredible person. When I give you compliments, you're like, oh, but I
Sure,
want you
sure.
to really hear
I just
this.
gotta be humble. Yeah.
Well, I
Try to be.
think that the thing is that we don't want to come across as like having a massive ego or whatever. And
Sure.
we're like, oh, yeah, you're right. You're 100% right about me. It obviously
Yeah, yeah.
feels good. And you are somebody who brings together community yourself. So what you see in me, I see in you. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that you are still just brimming full of potential. And I'm so proud of you. 38 podcasts, man.
Oh,
Really
sure.
good on
Thank
you.
you. Thank you. You're always very good at saying very nice things.
Well,
So
thanks.
appreciated. So you're saying you're open to 4. I guess the whole. I mean, I'm sure you probably look at it this way anyway. Like you. I feel like you've already won. Yeah. I mean,
Hmm.
you're already in win mode. So it's kind of you're just putting gravy on. Like I don't know. For that's
Well, life is
sure.
hopefully a good long chunk of time. I'm
100%.
only in my
Well,
30s now.
I just mean.
So I agree with you. I think that what I've already accomplished, and that would include the family and this life that we've cultivated, this is it. This is what I've always dreamed of. And anything above and beyond that, I would say, is just the continuation, hopefully, of getting to see this life as it plays out. I'm an existentialist, and what that means is I really enjoy those big, heavy questions of existence,
Mm-hmm.
what it is to exist, to not exist at some point in the future. We all have an expiration date. Um, Most of us don't know when or how, thankfully, but we know that that is a part of being. With that said, though, it's what do we do in our life's time?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that so many of us feel like, well, I'm just one person. What could I do? Right? Or what's the importance of me? And I would say that each and every one of us has a contribution to make. Each and every one of us has something that we can give, and we have ripples to make. Sometimes we have to do a hard pivot, even if that wasn't what we had intended or planned. Things don't necessarily go according to the plan that we have in our head as to how it quote unquote should be.
Yeah.
But also, it is that adaptability and seeing where we're needed. And each and every person has something that they are able to do to that end. What is it that you want to do in your lifetime,
Oh,
Eddie?
please me. You're
Oh!
gonna ask me this question at the end. It's, I mean, that's the big question, isn't it?
Yeah,
Um,
it's one of the
well,
biggest.
you kind of already said it very nicely just a bit ago. With I've always been I get so much fulfillment with bringing people together um, and creating that environment of what's the word, like people feeling comfortable to be themselves and to share themselves with others. That's so like when I'm putting together a film project, I always think about it as the phases of the production too, where I enjoy bringing the people together, and everybody's in the passion of and on the road of their own passion, and bringing all those passions together and making a thing like that in its own is fulfilling. And then the thing itself that is made is then turned over and shared with the world, and can then provide additional messaging and feels in here for people to go out into the world then and have this openness and this hopefully a different view, or an adjusted view of the world where they are less. I think people can veer negative very easily. So trying to flip that to like, no, think positively first, or benefit of the doubt, or such and such.
Yeah.
I think that's my short answer is whatever that was. Providing some sort.
So you're trying to provide a lighthouse, a glimmer of hope for people to
hope.
do their best selves.
We're all the hope, like you kind of said earlier. Hope is huge.
Yeah.
And again, like your earlier talk of just the awareness of the not aloneness feeling, and the I don't know, just the message of my latest movie that I just shot in May is like living in the moment versus thinking too much about the future or mulling over decisions in the past. It's like be in the present, and that presentness, the listening, the love, like all of that is, it's all we have. So don't waste this moment here for, like, it's that weird combo of like living in the moment actually provides a better future to live in the moment in. So it's the whole weird thing. So that's something I've been pushing a lot lately, is presentness and appreciation.
Yeah. I think that is one of the best things that we can possibly do, because we can't change the past. The future is not yet written. Certainly we can try to put planning and preparation towards that future that we hope to cultivate, but where are we? We're here. We're here and now. Yeah.
Yep. So I guess lastly, I'll end with, we'll kind of bookend this with the therapy talk.
Sure.
Because I'm a big fan of proactiveness versus reactiveness.
Oh yeah.
So what can people be mindful of or be signing up for to keep thy mental self healthy now, so create a less percentage chance of I don't know, whatever, mental health? Bad question, but I hope you know what I'm trying to ask.
I got you. So I want to talk directly here to the audience. I said it earlier and I'll say it again. We all have mental health, whatever condition that it might be in. And when we can tune into things that are happening internally, we can better deal with the things that are happening externally. And in addition to that, if you are not okay, and how do we know that we're not okay, right? We might feel like, wow, I don't feel okay, but it might also be in the things that are happening around you. So for example, lashing out more frequently, or it could be that sense of overwhelm. You're going into fight, flight, freeze mode. It might be that there's some really heavy substance use. and abuse. It could be that there is that sense of isolation and loneliness. There's so many different ways to come into the understanding that something is happening. And there might also be that sense of, well, what could I even do about this? And that right there, I think, is one of the biggest signals that maybe you need some additional support. Now, that could be just family and friends reaching out to people who you love dearly, and saying, hey, I'd love to go for a walk. I'd love to go get a cup of coffee. I would love to just talk to you for a little while. But it might also be that there might be some professional support that might be integrated in as well. The thing about therapy is that it doesn't necessarily mean that there's something wrong with you. It could very well just mean that you are having a very natural reaction to some extraordinarily trying circumstances. And that this moment really could be the bread and butter for what it is that you do with the rest of your beautiful life. And if it doesn't feel that way right now, I would encourage you to please keep on keeping on, because eventually you can look back and you can see that long fetch of time, your own history, and what it was that you got through in order to come into the here and now. If you had asked me back in 2014 how I felt about things versus now, I would say now I am very happy, in fact. But part of that too was the endurance. It was as well leaning on my village and knowing that I had people around me whom I could lean on when needed. And I think that being there for others is one of the ways that we can give back. If you see somebody struggling to put groceries in their car, maybe it's an elderly individual, be willing to say, hey, do you need support? Would you like some help? It could be something that a friend is grieving. Offer to do their dishes, right? There are small things that we can do to make this world a better place. And part of it is first saying, maybe I'm not in a position to give that to somebody else because I myself am right now in need of that support. And I think it's one of the hardest things to do is ask for help, right? Oh, it's one of the most vulnerable things that we can do. But one of the most important, in that if we don't do that, then I think that we don't give ourselves that leg to stand on to really succeed. So thank you all for listening to what I've had to share with you, and I truly hope that this will inspire somebody to live their glorious life.
Beautifully said. Beautifully said. Thank you. Super last question. Where can people that want to keep up with, let's say, Therapy Thursdays, I think those go up online.
Yeah.
Sierra Sunrise Wellness. Where can people follow Nora or the business or the segments? Is there a little shout out to the that kind of stuff?
Cool. Thanks. So if you're in the Reno area, then Therapy Thursdays every other Thursday around 8:15 a.m. So if you want to catch me live. In addition to that, those segments do go online to my Facebook page. My business is Sierra Sunrise Wellness Group. We also have an Instagram. In addition, and that's also Sierra Sunrise Wellness Group. My website is sierrasunrisewellness.com. I would say as well, for those who are looking to start therapy, I would recommend trying psychologytoday.com or goodtherapy.org. These are both resources where you can filter out results that will meet your needs. So for example, insurance, cost, as well as specific issues that are presenting for you and your area. Wherever you are, there are resources. There are now some online resources that might also be an option. But in addition to that, for me personally, I would say hopefully I'll just continue to grow and flourish here. And I think I'll always be trying to post additional updates as to where people can find more resources. Blog posts, that's something I hope to do more of coming up soon.
For sure. I like it. Okay. All right. Well, thanks again for having me over. Thanks for being on.
Thanks.
Great to see you.
Yeah.
And we'll leave it there.
Okay.
All right. Bye.
Bum, 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 bum.